What happens when the past holds the key to the future? When something considered outdated becomes the most advanced technology in the room? Zoey Martinez thought she knew the answer, until her grandfather's old wristwatch changed everything she believed about her family, her job, and herself. This is the story of how one woman's inheritance became the world's most dangerous secret. But before we begin, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell us where you're listening from. The morning fog clung to the glass towers of Austin's tech district like a shroud, muffling the sounds of the awakening city. Inside the sleek chrome and glass building of Nexus Advanced Technologies, fluorescent lights hummed to life, illuminating workstations that looked more like spacecraft control panels than typical office desks. Zoey Martinez pushed through the revolving glass doors, her worn canvas messenger bag bouncing against her hip. The security guard, Marcus, gave her his usual warm nod. At 28, Zoey had the kind of understated intelligence that people often overlooked. Dark brown eyes that missed nothing, shoulder-length black hair, usually pulled back in a practical ponytail, and a wardrobe that prioritized function over fashion. "Morning, Dr. Martinez," Marcus said, though they both knew she preferred just Zoey. The title felt too formal, too much like something she was still growing into. "Morning, Marcus. How's your grandson's science project coming along? Thanks to those books you recommended, he's building a working telescope. You're a lifesaver." Zoey smiled genuinely. These small interactions often felt more meaningful than the conversations she had with her colleagues upstairs. She badged into the elevator, watching the numbers climb to the 15th floor where the Quantum Communications Division resided. The elevator doors opened to reveal a workspace that looked like it had been designed by someone who'd watched too many science fiction movies. Everything was white, chrome, and glass, with holographic displays floating above most workstations. Her colleagues moved through this space like they belonged in it, their smartwatches syncing with their workstations, their AR glasses displaying data streams that danced around their heads like digital halos. And then there was Zoey, walking to her corner workstation with her grandfather's 1952 Hamilton wristwatch strapped to her left wrist. "Still wearing Grandpa's antique, I see," came a voice from behind her. Dr. Richard Hawthorne, the division's golden boy, appeared at her shoulder. He was everything Zoey wasn't: polished, connected, and blessed with the kind of confidence that came from never being told he didn't belong somewhere. Zoey glanced down at the watch. Its silver case had developed a warm patina over the decades, and the white face showed hairline cracks that somehow made it more beautiful rather than less. The second hand swept smoothly around the dial with the precision that only mechanical watches could achieve. "It keeps perfect time," she said simply, settling into her chair. "I'm sure it does, but don't you think it's a little dated for someone working on quantum encrypted satellite communications?" Richard's tone was light, but Zoey caught the underlying condescension. "I mean, my watch can monitor my heart rate, translate languages, and connect to 12 different satellites simultaneously." Zoey booted up her workstation, watching the multiple screens come alive with scrolling data. "That's nice, Richard. Does it tell time?" A few other colleagues had gathered around, drawn by the familiar morning entertainment of watching Richard needle the quirky new hire. Dr. Sarah Chun from the encryption team smiled behind her coffee mug. Jason Burke from hardware development openly smirked. "Of course it tells time," Richard said, missing the subtle sarcasm entirely. "It syncs with atomic clocks worldwide. It's accurate to within nanoseconds." "Impressive," Zoey said, pulling up the day's simulation parameters. "My grandfather's watch has been accurate for 72 years without ever needing to sync with anything." Dr. Elena Vasquez, the department head, emerged from her office just as the group began to disperse. At 55, Elena had the kind of presence that could silence a room without her saying a word. Her silver hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her dark eyes missed nothing. "Dr. Martinez," she said, approaching Zoey's workstation. "Are you ready for today's security simulation?" "Yes, ma'am. All parameters have been reviewed and verified." Elena nodded, then her gaze fell to Zoey's wrist. For a moment, her expression shifted, surprise, perhaps even recognition, before settling back into its usual professional mask. "That's an interesting piece," Elena said quietly. "It was my grandfather's. He was in the army." "I see." Elena's response was carefully neutral, but Zoe caught something in her tone, a weight that suggested the comment meant more than it appeared. "Well, let's see what today brings us." As Elena walked away, Zoe noticed her pulling out her phone and typing rapidly. Something about the interaction felt significant, though she couldn't put her finger on why. The morning progressed like most others. Zoe worked on quantum encryption protocols while her colleagues discussed the latest tech trends and showed off their newest gadgets. She was good at her job, better than good, actually, but she'd learned to keep her insights measured and her innovations incremental. Standing out too much as the new hire rarely ended well. Around 10:30, the building's PA system crackled to life. All Quantum Communications Division personnel to Lab 7 for the scheduled security simulation. This is a mandatory exercise. Please bring all devices and cease current project work. Zoe saved her files and gathered her things. The security simulations were a monthly ritual, elaborate tests of their system's vulnerability to various forms of cyber attack. She participated in 3 since joining the company 6 months ago, and they typically involved a lot of sitting around watching senior staff demonstrate various hacking scenarios. Lab 7 was one of the larger testing facilities, filled with isolated workstations and monitoring equipment that could simulate various network conditions and security threats. About 25 staff members filed in, taking seats around the room's perimeter while the senior technicians set up the day's scenarios. "Today we're testing our satellite uplink security," announced Dr. Peterson, the head of cybersecurity. He was a thin man with nervous energy who always looked like he'd had too much coffee. "We've created a simulated version of several government and military satellite networks. Your job is to identify vulnerabilities in our quantum encryption protocols when they interface with these systems." The staff settled in for what everyone expected to be another routine exercise. Screens around the room displayed various network diagrams and data streams. Zoe found herself seated near the back, her grandfather's watch catching the overhead lights as she reached for a notepad. The simulation began normally enough. Dr. Peterson and his team launched various simulated attacks against their systems while the rest of the division watched and took notes. Zoe found herself studying the satellite communication protocols, noticing patterns and inefficiencies that others seemed to miss. 20 minutes into the exercise, something changed. It started as a subtle vibration against her wrist. Zoe glanced down at her grandfather's watch, surprised to see that the second hand had stopped moving. The time showed 10:47, but according to the digital clock on the wall, it was 10:52. She frowned, tapping the crystal gently. Mechanical watches sometimes needed a little encouragement, especially older ones. But instead of resuming its sweep, the second hand began moving backward. "That's odd," she murmured, just as every screen in the lab suddenly went black. Dr. Peterson looked up from his console, confusion replacing confidence. That wasn't supposed to happen. The screens flickered back to life, but instead of the familiar simulation interface, they now displayed what looked like actual satellite telemetry data. Numbers and coordinates scrolled past in real time, and in the corner of each screen, a military-style timestamp counted down from 15 minutes. "Peterson, shut it down," Elena commanded from her position near the main console. "I'm trying, but the system isn't responding to any shutdown commands." Zoe stared at her watch. The second hand was now moving in perfect synchronization with the countdown timer on the screens. For every second that ticked backward on the military countdown, her grandfather's watch hand moved one position counterclockwise. The simulations accessing live satellite feeds called out Jason from his monitoring station. "This isn't simulated data. These are actual military satellites." A chill ran through the room as the implications became clear. Their supposedly secure testing environment had somehow broken through its isolation protocols and was now interfaced with real government and military networks. "Elena, you need to see this." Dr. Peterson's voice had risen an octave. "The system is actively communicating with Northcom satellites. It's not just accessing data, it's sending queries. Zoe's watch began to emit a soft, rhythmic beeping, a sound she'd never heard it make before. The beeping synchronized perfectly with the data streams flowing across the screens, as if her grandfather's 72-year-old timepiece was somehow conducting this digital orchestra. Every eye in the room turned to her wrist. "Dr. Martinez," Elena's voice was deadly calm. "I need you to remove that watch immediately." But as Zoe reached for the clasp, the countdown timer hit 10 minutes, and every screen in the lab suddenly displayed a single message in bold red letters. Heritage Protocol Activated Authentication Required Identity, SGT. Carlos Martinez. 1952 clearance. Project Chronos status, active. The room fell into absolute silence, broken only by the gentle beeping of a watch that suddenly seemed far from ordinary. The silence in Lab 7 stretched like a taut wire, ready to snap. Zoe stared at her grandfather's name displayed across multiple screens, her mind reeling. Carlos Martinez. Project Chronos. These weren't random coincidences. They were breadcrumbs from a past she'd never known existed. "Nobody move," Elena commanded, her voice cutting through the stunned quiet. She approached Zoe's workstation slowly, as if approaching a bomb that might detonate at any moment. "Dr. Martinez, I need you to listen very carefully. That watch isn't just a family heirloom, is it?" I don't understand," Zoe stammered, but even as she said it, memories began surfacing. Her grandfather's strange reluctance to talk about his military service. The way he'd always been vague about his duties, saying only that he'd worked on communications equipment. The fact that he'd insisted she take the watch on his deathbed, making her promise never to sell it or give it away. "You've activated a protocol that's been dormant for over 70 years, Elena continued, her eyes fixed on the scrolling data. "Your grandfather wasn't just a soldier, Zoe. He was part of one of the most classified projects in U.S. military history." Dr. Peterson's fingers flew over his keyboard, trying to regain control of the system. "The countdown's at 7 minutes, and we're getting automated responses from NORAD. They want to know why a Chronos device just came online." "Chronos device?" Richard stepped closer, his earlier condescension replaced by genuine alarm. "You mean that old watch is some kind of military technology?" Elena's expression was grim. Project Chronos was a 1950s program to create unhackable military communications. They embedded quantum encryption technology into everyday objects, watches, pens, compasses, things that soldiers could carry without arousing suspicion. The project was so classified that even the device's carriers didn't always know what they were carrying. Zoe's hand trembled as she looked at the watch. The second hand continued its backward sweep, perfectly synchronized with the countdown timer. "But it's mechanical. It doesn't even have a battery." "Quantum mechanical," Dr. Chin interjected, her expertise in quantum systems suddenly relevant in ways none of them had anticipated. "The encryption could be embedded in the molecular structure of the metal itself. Theoretically, you could create a communication device that would be completely undetectable until activated by a specific trigger." "What kind of trigger?" Zoe asked, though part of her already suspected the answer. Elena pointed to the screens showing satellite telemetry, a security simulation that accidentally interfaced with the exact military networks your grandfather's device was designed to communicate with. The quantum signatures recognized each other and initiated an automatic authentication sequence. The countdown timer hit 5 minutes, and suddenly new data began flooding the screens. Military deployment schedules, satellite positioning coordinates, communication protocols. Information so sensitive that several staff members unconsciously stepped backward. "Jesus Christ," whispered Jason. "This is real-time operational data. If anyone else could see this." "They can't," Elena said quickly. "The Chronos protocol creates a quantum encrypted tunnel. Only authorized devices can decode the transmission. But that raises another question." She turned to Zoe. "How did you know to come here?" "What do you mean?" 6 months ago, you applied for a position in our quantum communications division. You had excellent credentials, but there were dozens of applicants with similar qualifications. Yet you specifically requested assignment to the team working on military satellite interfaces. Zoey frowned, thinking back to her job search. I was attracted to the cutting-edge research. The job posting mentioned work on next-generation communication systems. That job posting was classified and only distributed through specific channels, Elena said quietly. Channels connected to legacy programs like Chronos. The implications hit Zoey like a physical blow. You're saying I was somehow guided here? I'm saying that Watch may have been sending subtle signals for years, leading you towards situations where it could eventually be activated. Your grandfather may have programmed it to find its way back into military communications research. The countdown reached 3 minutes, and a new message appeared on the central screen. Heritage carrier identified. Zoey Martinez bloodline verified clearance inherited awaiting final authentication. Final authentication? Richard asked nervously. What does that mean? Before Elena could answer, Zoe's watch began beeping more rapidly, and she felt a slight tingling sensation where the metal touched her skin. The watch face, which had remained unchanged for 72 years, suddenly began to glow with a soft blue light. It's reading my biometrics, Zoey realized. Pulse, skin conductivity, maybe even DNA through skin contact. Dr. Peterson looked up from his console, sweat beading on his forehead. I'm getting inquiries from 3 different military agencies. They want to know about the Chronos activation. Elena, we need to shut this down before. He was cut off by a new sound. The lab's security doors engaging their electromagnetic locks. Red warning lights began flashing, and the building's automated security system announced, Lab 7 is now under containment protocol. No personnel may enter or leave until clearance is obtained. Someone's taken remote control of our building security, Dr. Peterson announced, his voice tight with panic. Elena moved to her personal communication device, but found no signal. They're jamming us. Professional-grade electronic warfare equipment. The countdown timer reached 1 minute. Zoey looked around at her colleagues, some frightened, others fascinated, all of them trapped in a situation that had escalated far beyond anyone's control. Her grandfather's watch pulsed against her wrist, warm and somehow alive. What happens when it reaches 0? She asked. Elena met her eyes, and in that moment, Zoey saw something she hadn't expected, not fear but anticipation. Then we find out what your grandfather really wanted you to inherit. The timer hit midnight. Every screen in the lab went white for a split second, then exploded with information. Not the raw data they'd been seeing before, but organized intelligence reports, operational summaries, and most importantly, a video feed that made everyone in the room freeze. The feed showed a conference room somewhere else in the building, a room Zoey had never seen before. Around a polished table sat several people in military uniforms and business suits. At the head of the table, speaking into a secure phone, was someone Zoey recognized, Dr. Elena Vasquez. But this wasn't Elena as she appeared now. This Elena had shorter hair, wore a military uniform with colonel's insignia, and was clearly in command of whatever meeting was taking place. On the lab's audio system, they could hear her saying, Chronos 5 has successfully activated. The heritage carrier has been identified and authenticated. We can proceed to Phase 2. The Elena, standing next to Zoey in Lab 7, smiled apologetically. I'm sorry for the deception, Dr. Martinez, but some secrets are too important to leave to chance. Zoey stared at her supervisor, who was apparently also a military colonel and had been orchestrating events from the beginning. You knew all along what would happen. Your grandfather and I served together in the original Chronos program. When he told me he was leaving the watch to his granddaughter who was studying quantum physics, we began making preparations. We've been waiting for you to find your way here for 28 years. The weight of manipulation, of having her entire career path potentially orchestrated by forces she'd never suspected, should have made Zoey angry. Instead, she felt something else entirely, a strange sense of coming home. What is Phase 2? She asked. Elena, Colonel Vasquez, gestured to the screens around them, which were now displaying what looked like a global map with pulsing points of light scattered across continents. There are 47 other Chronos devices scattered around the world. Some are held by the descendants of their original carriers. Others have been lost or sold. A few have fallen into the wrong hands. Her expression grew grave. 3 days ago, intelligence agencies detected that someone was trying to hack the Chronos network. If they succeed, they'll have access to the most sensitive military communications on the planet. Zoey looked down at her grandfather's watch, which had resumed its normal function but retained that subtle blue glow. And you need me to stop them. We need you to do what your grandfather designed that watch to do, Elena corrected. We need you to use it. The revelation that her entire professional life had been carefully orchestrated should have left Zoey feeling manipulated and angry. Instead, as she sat in a secure conference room 3 floors above Lab 7, she felt something unexpected: relief. The nagging sense that she'd never quite belonged anywhere was finally explained. She'd been unconsciously following a path laid out by her grandfather decades before her birth. Colonel Elena Vasquez. Zoey still struggled to think of her as anything other than her department head, sat across from her at a polished briefing table. The room's walls were covered with monitors displaying global maps dotted with pulsing indicators, satellite feeds, and streams of encrypted communications data. The Chronos network was revolutionary for its time, Elena explained, her military bearing now undisguised. Your grandfather and 46 other operatives were equipped with devices that could communicate instantaneously across any distance using quantum entanglement principles. The encryption was unbreakable because it existed at the subatomic level. But the technology was supposed to be decades away, Zoey said, studying the watch on her wrist. The blue glow had settled into a soft, steady pulse that seemed to match her heartbeat. Officially, it still is. The Chronos project was terminated in 1953 after several devices were lost during field operations. The military decided the technology was too dangerous to continue developing. Elena pulled up a classified document on the central screen. Unofficially, we've been waiting for the right moment to reactivate the network. What changed? Elena's expression darkened. 3 days ago, our monitoring systems detected someone attempting to brute force crack the quantum encryption on dormant Chronos devices. They haven't succeeded yet, but they're getting closer. On the main screen, a world map highlighted several locations with red warning indicators. We've identified attempted intrusions at 17 locations where Chronos devices are known or suspected to exist. London, Tokyo, Berlin, Moscow. Someone with significant resources is conducting a coordinated global operation. Zoey examined the data streams flowing across the screens. Even with her advanced training in quantum communications, the complexity was staggering. How is someone even attempting this? The computational power required would be enormous. We believe they're using a distributed quantum computer network, possibly involving hijacked resources from multiple nations. The attack pattern suggests coordination between several intelligence agencies or a well-funded private organization. And if they succeed? Elena's pause was answer enough, but she spelled it out anyway. Real-time access to classified military communications from the world's major powers. They could monitor troop movements, intercept diplomatic communications, even interfere with nuclear command and control systems. Zoey felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders like a lead blanket. Why me? If you've known about the other devices for 70 years, why not reactivate them before now? Because, Elena said, pulling up another document, the Chronos devices weren't just communication tools. They were designed as a fail-safe system. Each device can override and control all others in the network, but only when activated by a direct genetic descendant of its original carrier. The implications hit Zoey immediately. You're saying I could take control of all 47 devices? Theoretically, yes. But more importantly, you could shut them down completely if necessary. Your grandfather insisted on that capability when he helped design the system. He called it the Heritage Protocol, a way to ensure the network could never be turned against the country it was meant to protect. Zoey stood and walked to the windows overlooking Austin's tech district. The city looked normal from up here, traffic flowing along the highways, construction cranes reaching toward the sky, life proceeding as usual. But underneath this normalcy, she was learning about secret networks, quantum communications, and international espionage operations that could destabilize the entire world. "What do you need me to do?" Elena joined her at the window. "We need to reactivate the network before our attackers can break the encryption. Once all devices are online and under centralized control, we can trace the intrusion attempts back to their source and neutralize the threat. And if something goes wrong, then you use the Heritage Protocol to shut everything down permanently. The devices would become nothing more than expensive antiques, but the network would be safe." Zoey turned back to the displays showing the global situation. Several new red indicators had appeared while they'd been talking. "The attacks are increasing. Every hour we delay gives them more time to break through. We estimate they'll succeed within the next 18 hours unless we act first." A soft chime from Zoey's watch drew her attention. The blue glow had intensified, and she could feel a subtle vibration against her skin. On the screens around the room, several of the global indicators changed from amber to green. "It's already happening," Elena observed. "Your device is beginning to establish connections with others in the network. The quantum entanglement is strengthening as more devices come online." "I can feel it," Zoey said, surprised by the statement even as she made it. There was something flowing through the watch, a sense of connection that extended far beyond the physical device. "It's like I can sense the other devices." Elena pulled up a network diagram on the central screen. Green lines now connected Zoey's location to 7 other points around the globe: London, Paris, Berlin, Tokyo, Sydney, Sao Paulo, and Cairo. Those devices have responded to your activation signal and are coming online. Who has them? Descendants of the original operatives, mostly. A retired professor in London whose grandfather was in the RAF. A watchmaker in Tokyo whose great-uncle was in military intelligence. People who've carried family heirlooms for years without knowing their true purpose. As they watched, more connections appeared on the map. Each new link brought a stronger pulse from Zoey's watch and a clearer sense of the network scope. It was like watching a sleeping giant gradually wake up. "Elena," Zoey said, studying the pattern of connections, "some of these links are different, stronger." Elena examined the display, her expression growing concerned. "You're right. These 3 devices, in Moscow, Beijing, and Tehran, they're showing much higher activity levels than the others. Could they be the source of the attacks? Or they could be compromised?" Elena moved to a secure communication terminal. "I need to contact our field teams immediately. If hostile forces have control of active Chronos devices." Before she could complete the call, alarms began sounding throughout the building. The screens around the room flickered, then displayed a message that made both women freeze. "Network intrusion detected, hostile override, attempted Heritage Protocol activation required, countdown 45 minutes. Zoey's watch grew noticeably warmer against her skin, and the blue glow became almost blinding. "Elena, what's happening?" "Someone's trying to take control of the network through the compromised devices. You need to activate the Heritage Protocol now, before they can lock us out." "But you said that would destroy the entire network." "Better destroyed than in enemy hands." Elena's training had taken over completely. She was no longer Zoey's supervisor, but a military officer facing a critical threat. "Dr. Martinez, this is a direct order. Activate the Heritage Protocol immediately." Zoey looked at the global map, watching as red warning indicators spread like an infection across the network connections. Somewhere out there, people she'd never met were depending on her decision. The descendants of her grandfather's fellow operatives, intelligence agents trying to protect their nation's secrets, and countless others who would be affected if this quantum communication network fell into the wrong hands. But there was something else, a feeling coming through the watch that suggested the situation was more complex than it appeared. The network wasn't just under attack. It was trying to tell her something. "Elena," she said, studying the data patterns more carefully, "I don't think we're dealing with a simple hostile takeover. Look at the signal patterns from the compromised devices." Elena moved to examine the display. "What am I looking at?" "The intrusion isn't random. It's following a specific sequence, almost like Zoe paused as the realization hit her, like it's trying to activate something within the network itself. The countdown timer reached 30 minutes, and suddenly every screen in the room displayed a new message. Greetings, Heritage Carrier Project Chronos Phase 2 initiated authentication. Dmitry Volkov, 1952 message follows. Elena stepped back from the screens, her face pale. Dmitry Volkov was your grandfather's partner in the Chronos program. He was supposed to have died in 1953. The screens flickered, then displayed what was unmistakably a live video feed. An elderly man with steel gray hair and piercing blue eyes looked directly at them through the camera. Behind him, Zoe could see banks of sophisticated computer equipment and what appeared to be a military command center. "Hello, Colonel Vasquez," the man said in accented English. "And you must be Carlos's granddaughter. I am Dmitry Volkov, and it is time you learned the real purpose of Project Chronos." The face on the screen belonged to a ghost, or at least a man who was supposed to be one. Dmitry Volkov looked every one of his 90-plus years, but his eyes held the sharp intelligence of someone who had spent decades preparing for this moment. "You're supposed to be dead," Elena said, her hand moving instinctively toward her sidearm. Volkov smiled, the expression transforming his weathered features. "Death is sometimes a useful fiction, Colonel. It allows one to work without interference from bureaucrats who lack vision." "You're behind the network intrusions," Zoe accused, though even as she said it, something about the accusation felt wrong. The data pattern she'd observed didn't match a hostile takeover. They were too precise, too carefully orchestrated. "I'm behind many things, young Martinez. But an intrusion? No. I am executing the original purpose of Project Chronos, a purpose your grandfather and I designed, but never revealed to our military handlers." Elena moved closer to the screens, her military training warring with decades of intelligence training. "Carlos never mentioned a secondary purpose for the project, because revealing it would have meant court-martial and execution for treason. What we discovered in 1952 was too dangerous to entrust to any single government." Volkov's expression grew grave. "We found evidence of a conspiracy that transcended national boundaries, a network of individuals in positions of power who were working to manipulate global conflicts for their own benefit." On the screens around them, the network diagram continued to evolve. More devices were coming online, but instead of the chaotic pattern of an attack, Zoe could see an organized structure emerging. The connections formed geometric patterns that seemed almost intentional. "The Chronos devices weren't designed just for communication," Volkov continued. "They were designed to monitor and, if necessary, disrupt the communications networks of this shadow conspiracy. Your grandfather called them the architects, people who profited from war and instability by playing all sides against each other." "That's impossible," Elena protested. "The technology in 1952 wasn't advanced enough for that kind of surveillance operation." "Conventional technology, no. But Carlos and I were working with something far beyond conventional understanding." Volkov's image was joined by historical documents and photographs. "We had access to recovered German research from the war, projects that combined quantum physics with early computing technology. The Nazis were further advanced than anyone realized." Zoe studied the technical specifications flowing across the screens. Even with her modern understanding of quantum mechanics, some of the concepts were barely comprehensible. These equations, they're describing quantum entanglement on a massive scale. "Precisely. We embedded quantum sensors throughout the global communications infrastructure of the 1950s. Every phone call, telegraph transmission, and radio broadcast could be monitored through quantum resonance. The Chronos devices served as control nodes for this surveillance network, and you've been operating it in secret for 70 years. Elena asked. "Operating it, refining it, expanding it. The modern internet, satellite communications, cellular networks, all of them carry quantum resonance signatures that we can monitor. We've been tracking the architect's communications for decades." The implications staggered Zoe. You're describing a surveillance network that makes the NSA look like amateur hour. The NSA is small time compared to what the architects have built, Volkov replied grimly. They have infiltrated intelligence agencies, military commands, and corporate structures in every major nation. They orchestrate conflicts to drive weapons sales, manipulate markets to generate profits, and eliminate anyone who threatens their operations. Why reveal this now? Elena demanded. Why activate the network? Because they've discovered our surveillance activities and are planning to neutralize us permanently. 3 days ago, we intercepted communications indicating a coordinated strike against all known Chronos devices and their carriers. Volkov's expression became urgent. They're not trying to hack the network. They're trying to destroy it and everyone connected to it. Zoey felt her watch pulse against her wrist, and suddenly the network connections on the screens took on new meaning. The other carriers, they're all in danger. 7 of them have already disappeared under suspicious circumstances. Heart attacks, car accidents, random muggings, all plausibly deniable, but statistically impossible to be coincidental. Elena was already moving to her communication terminal. I need to contact our field teams immediately. If there's a coordinated elimination operation in progress. Your field teams are compromised, Volkov interrupted. The architects have people throughout your organization, Colonel. The only reason Dr. Martinez is still alive is because she activated her device before they could act. How do I know you're telling the truth? Zoey asked. You could be the architect conspiracy for all I know. Volkov nodded approvingly. Healthy skepticism. Your grandfather would be proud. He gestured to someone off-screen, and new data began flowing across the displays. These are communication intercepts from the past 72 hours. You tell me what you think. The data showed a pattern of encrypted communications between government officials, corporate executives, and military leaders across multiple nations. The encryption was sophisticated, but the quantum monitoring network had captured and decoded it in real time. As Zoey read through the transcripts, a chill ran down her spine. The communications discussed eliminating Chronos assets, neutralizing surveillance capabilities, and preparing for Phase 3 implementation. Most disturbing were references to acceptable casualty levels and collateral damage parameters that suggested whatever Phase 3 entailed would result in massive loss of life. My God, Elena whispered, reading over Zoe's shoulder. They're planning a war. Not planning, Volkov corrected. Executing. Phase 3 begins in 18 hours with a coordinated cyber attack on critical infrastructure in 12 nations. Power grids will fail, communication networks will go down, and emergency services will be overwhelmed. In the chaos that follows, the architects will emerge as the providers of solutions. Solutions they'll charge handsomely for. And the governments will pay, Zoey realized. Because they'll have no choice. Exactly. But the attacks will be blamed on foreign adversaries, justifying massive military responses and creating the kind of global conflict the architects have been cultivating for decades. Elena stood, pacing to the windows overlooking Austin. If this is true, we need to alert every intelligence agency on the planet. With what proof? Volkov asked. Intercepts obtained through an illegal surveillance network operated by a supposedly dead Soviet agent? Even if they believed you, the architects have people in positions to suppress or discredit any evidence. Then what do you propose? Zoey asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. We use the Chronos network for its original purpose. We monitor their communications, track their operations, and when Phase 3 begins, we disrupt it from the inside. That's a massive undertaking, Elena protested. The quantum processing power alone would require 47 synchronized Chronos devices operating in perfect harmony, Volkov completed. Which is why your grandfather designed the Heritage Protocol not to destroy the network, but to unlock its full potential. Zoey looked down at her watch, which was now pulsing in sync with her heartbeat. The blue glow had spread beyond the watch face, creating patterns of light that seemed to move just beneath her skin. What happens to me when I activate the full protocol? Volkov's expression softened. I won't lie to you. The quantum entanglement will be intense. You'll become the central node for a global surveillance network processing millions of communications simultaneously. The neurological strain could be significant. Could be. Elena stepped forward. What aren't you telling us? Your grandfather underwent the procedure once, in 1953, during the original field test. He survived, but the experience changed him. He said afterward that he could sense information flows across the entire planet. Every encrypted message, every classified communication, every secret that moved through electronic networks. Zoey remembered her grandfather in his final years, the way he sometimes seemed to be listening to conversations no one else could hear, the strange comments he made about world events days before they appeared in the news. The headaches. He always had terrible headaches. The quantum resonance creates persistent neural pathways. Once established, they never fully disappear. Your grandfather spent the rest of his life with partial access to the global information grid. And you want me to risk the same thing? I want you to save millions of lives, Volkov said quietly. Phase 3 isn't just about market manipulation or political control. The infrastructure attacks they're planning will cripple emergency services during the worst winter storm system in decades. Hospitals will lose power, heating systems will fail, communication networks that coordinate disaster response will go dark. Elena pulled up weather data on one of the auxiliary screens. He's right. The National Weather Service is predicting a massive storm system that will hit the eastern seaboard tomorrow night. If the power grid fails during that storm, thousands will die from exposure, medical emergencies, and accidents in the first 24 hours alone. Zoey finished. She'd studied disaster response scenarios in her graduate work. The cascading failures that occurred when critical infrastructure went down simultaneously. On the main screen, the countdown timer continued its relentless advance. 12 minutes. 12 minutes until what? Zoey asked. Until the architect's preliminary cyber probes reach critical information systems, Volkov explained. They're testing responses, mapping vulnerabilities, preparing the attack vectors for Phase 3. Once they complete this reconnaissance phase, stopping them becomes exponentially more difficult. Zoey closed her eyes, feeling the quantum harmonics flowing through her grandfather's watch. The sensation was unlike anything she'd experienced, as if she could sense electromagnetic fields across vast distances, detect the pulse of information flowing through fiber optic cables and satellite links. I can feel it already, she whispered. The network. It's like having extra senses. The Heritage Protocol amplifies your natural ability to interface with quantum systems, Volkov confirmed. Your grandfather chose you specifically because genetic analysis indicated you'd inherited the neurological structures necessary to handle the quantum entanglement. He's been planning this since before I was born, Zoey realized. Since before your parents were born. Carlos was a man who thought in generational timescales. Elena moved to stand beside Zoey. Whatever you decide, I want you to know that none of this was about manipulation or deception. Your grandfather genuinely believed you were the only person who could handle this responsibility. And if I say no, Volkov's image flickered as interference patterns crossed the screen. Then in 18 hours, the modern world begins a descent into chaos that will make the 20th century's wars look like minor disagreements. The architects have been building toward this moment for decades. The countdown reached 8 minutes, and suddenly alarms began sounding throughout the building again. This time, however, they were joined by the distinctive wail of citywide emergency sirens. Elena rushed to a communication terminal, her fingers flying over the keyboard. I'm getting reports of power grid anomalies in 12 major cities. Rolling blackouts, communication disruptions, emergency services going offline for seconds at a time. They're testing their weapons, Volkov said grimly. Small-scale demonstrations to verify their attack vectors work as designed. Zoey watched the chaos spreading across the monitoring screens. Reports of traffic control systems failing in London, hospital generators activating unexpectedly in Tokyo, air traffic control experiencing technical difficulties in Berlin. Each incident lasted only minutes, but the pattern was unmistakable. They're not waiting 18 hours, she realized. They're accelerating the timeline. Because they know the Chronos network is coming online. They have to strike before we can fully activate our countermeasures. The watch on Zoe's wrist grew noticeably warmer, and she could feel quantum resonance building like pressure behind her eyes. The sensation wasn't painful yet, but she could sense that it would become overwhelming if the entanglement continued to intensify. "Elena," she said quietly, "I need you to promise me something. Anything. If this goes wrong, if the quantum entanglement damages my mind or turns me into something else, you'll shut down the network. Even if it means letting the architects succeed." Elena's military training warred with her human compassion, but finally she nodded. "I promise." Zoe took a deep breath and looked directly at Volkov's image on the screen. "Tell me exactly what I need to do." The quantum entanglement hit Zoe like a surge of electricity through her nervous system. As she placed her palm flat against the biometric scanner that had emerged from her grandfather's watch, the blue glow expanded beyond the device, racing up her arm in intricate patterns that looked like luminous circuitry beneath her skin. Quantum synchronization at 15% and climbing, Elena reported from her monitoring station, though her voice seemed to be coming from very far away. Zoe could feel the other Chronos devices connecting to her consciousness one by one. First came the professor in London. She could sense his confusion and fear as his grandfather's pocket watch suddenly came alive in his study. Then the watchmaker in Tokyo, working late in his shop when his great uncle's military timepiece began pulsing with impossible light. 25%, Elena called out. "Zoe, how are you feeling?" "Like I'm becoming part of something larger," Zoe replied, though the words felt inadequate to describe what was happening to her. Each new connection brought a flood of sensory input, not just from the devices themselves, but from the global communication networks they were designed to monitor. She could sense data flows through submarine cables crossing the Pacific, satellite transmissions bouncing between continents, the electronic pulse of millions of phone calls, emails, and text messages. It was overwhelming and beautiful and terrifying all at once. 35%. "Zoe, we're detecting massive quantum fluctuations in the global communications grid. The architect's systems are responding to your activation." Through the quantum network, Zoe could perceive the architect's operations with startling clarity. Their command centers appeared as dark nodes in the information flow, heavily encrypted hubs where data went in but nothing came out. She counted 17 major facilities spread across 6 continents, each one coordinating different aspects of the coming attack. "I can see them," she whispered. "Their entire network." Volkov was right. They've infiltrated everything. 50% synchronization, Elena announced. "Zoe, your vital signs are spiking. Heart rate, blood pressure, neural activity, all are far beyond normal parameters." But Zoe barely heard her. The quantum entanglement was allowing her to process information at inhuman speeds. She could follow thousands of conversations simultaneously, tracking the flow of commands from the architect's leadership to their operational cells around the world. "They're not just planning infrastructure attacks," she said, her voice taking on an odd harmonic quality as the quantum resonance affected her vocal cords. "They're orchestrating false flag operations. When the power grids fail, they'll blame foreign adversaries and launch retaliatory strikes." "Retaliation against whom?" Elena asked. "Everyone. Russia will blame the United States. China will blame Europe. Within hours, we'll have multiple nuclear powers on the brink of war, all while the architects profit from the chaos." 70% synchronization. "Zoe, I'm reading massive strain on your neural pathways. We may need to abort." "No." Zoe's response came with such force that the lights in the room flickered. "I can stop them, but I need full synchronization. The Heritage Protocol requires complete network integration." Through the quantum link, she could feel Volkov's presence like a warm beacon in the storm of information. His consciousness had been connected to the network for decades, and he guided her through the overwhelming flood of data. "Focus on the command structure," his voice echoed directly in her mind. "Find their central coordination node." Zoe's awareness expanded beyond Earth's surface, reaching into the quantum substrata that connected all electronic communication. She found what she was looking for hidden in plain sight, a quantum encryption key embedded in the global GPS satellite network itself. The architects had been using the navigation satellites as their primary command and control system for years. 85%. Zoey, your brain is processing information at rates that should be physically impossible. Because it's not just my brain anymore, Zoey replied, her consciousness now spread across 47 quantum nodes worldwide. I'm thinking with a distributed quantum computer that spans the globe. Through the satellite network, she could see the final preparation for Phase 3. In exactly 97 minutes, synchronized cyber attacks would target power generation facilities, communication hubs, transportation networks, and emergency services across 12 nations. The attacks would appear to come from each nation's traditional adversaries, triggering automatic retaliation protocols. 90% synchronization achieved. Zoey felt her individual identity beginning to dissolve into the larger quantum consciousness. She could sense the other Chronos carriers around the world. Most were terrified by what was happening to them, but a few understood and were lending their strength to the network. Elena, she said, her voice now carrying harmonics that vibrated through the building structure, I need you to contact the National Security Agency, GCHQ, and every other intelligence service you can reach. Tell them that in 96 minutes, their nations will be under coordinated cyber attack designed to trigger global war. They'll never believe me without proof. Then I'll give them proof. Zoey reached through the quantum network and began extracting the architects' operational plans directly from their encrypted systems. Terabytes of classified information flowed through the Chronos devices and into the monitoring systems of intelligence agencies worldwide. 95%. Zoey, you're approaching the threshold of human neurological capacity. I'm already past it, Zoey admitted. She could feel her human consciousness becoming just one node in a vast quantum network that spanned the globe. It was terrifying and exhilarating, like becoming part of the planet's electronic nervous system. The architect's response was swift and vicious. Realizing their security had been compromised, they accelerated their timeline. Instead of waiting 96 minutes, they began launching their attacks immediately. Power grids in New York and London started experiencing cascading failures. Communication satellites went offline over Europe. Transportation control systems in Tokyo began reporting phantom aircraft that triggered automatic collision avoidance protocols. They're starting Phase 3 early. Elena shouted over the sound of alarms. Zoey, you have to stop them now. 100% synchronization achieved, Zoey announced, her voice now carrying the harmonic resonance of the entire quantum network. Heritage Protocol fully activated. Through 47 quantum nodes, she reached into the global information infrastructure and began the most complex cyber operation in human history. She had to stop the architects' attacks while simultaneously preventing the automated retaliation systems from triggering global war. In New York, she rerouted power through backup systems milliseconds before the main grid collapsed. In London, she fed false signals to the architects' attack systems, making them believe their assault had succeeded while emergency power kept critical services running. In Tokyo, she eliminated the phantom aircraft from air traffic control systems and restored normal operations. But the architects weren't passive targets. As soon as they realized their attacks were being countered in real time, they began targeting the Chronos network itself. Zoey, Elena's voice seemed to come from very far away. We're detecting directed energy weapons targeting the Chronos carriers. They're trying to eliminate the network nodes physically. Through the quantum link, Zoey felt 3 of the carriers die in simultaneous attacks. A car bomb in Berlin, a sniper in Sao Paulo, a gas leak explosion in Mumbai. Each death tore through the network like a physical wound, reducing her processing capacity and leaving her more vulnerable to the architect's cyber attacks. I can't maintain all the countermeasures, she admitted, her human consciousness struggling to maintain coherence within the quantum matrix. There are too many attack vectors and not enough processing power. Then prioritize. Volkov's voice cut through the chaos. Save what you can and let the rest fail. Sometimes tactical defeat is necessary for strategic victory. Zoey made the hardest decision of her life. She abandoned the defense of secondary targets and focused all her quantum processing power on preventing nuclear retaliation. Power grids could be rebuilt, communication networks could be repaired, but if the world's nuclear powers launched against each other based on false information, there would be no coming back from that. Through satellite networks and buried communication cables, she intercepted and deleted launch authorization codes. She fed false telemetry to missile defense systems, making them report successful intercepts of attacks that never happened. She created phantom communications between world leaders, each designed to de-escalate tensions and prevent retaliation. Zoey, your neural activity is off the charts. I don't think your brain can handle much more of this. It doesn't have to, Zoey replied, understanding finally dawning. The Heritage Protocol was never designed to be permanent. It's a one-time weapon. She began implementing the protocol's final phase, a quantum cascade that would permanently burn out every piece of electronic equipment the architects controlled while leaving civilian infrastructure intact. It would cost her the Chronos network, but it would end the architects' threat once and for all. The cascade began at the quantum level, racing through fiber optic cables and satellite links at the speed of light. One by one, the architect command centers went dark as their systems overloaded and failed. Their attack programs crashed, their communication networks collapsed, and their carefully orchestrated global conspiracy crumbled in the space of 17 seconds. As the cascade completed, Zoey felt the quantum entanglement beginning to fade. Her consciousness, which had been spread across the globe, began contracting back toward her physical body. The sensation was like falling from an immense height, terrifying and disorienting. Synchronization dropping rapidly, Elena reported. 60%, 40%, 20%. Elena, Zoey said weakly, her voice returning to normal human tones. Tell me we won. According to these readings, every major cyber attack has been neutralized. Power grids are stable, communication networks are secure, and there are no reports of nuclear alerts anywhere in the world. And the architects, their entire operational network appears to have suffered simultaneous and catastrophic system failures. It'll take them years to rebuild, if they can rebuild at all. As the last traces of quantum entanglement faded, Zoey collapsed into her chair, physically and mentally exhausted. Her grandfather's watch had returned to its normal appearance, just an old mechanical timepiece with a worn silver case and a cracked white face. But she knew it would never be quite ordinary again. Neither would she. 3 weeks later, Zoey sat in a small cafe in downtown Austin, watching the world go about its normal business through rain-streaked windows. The November storm that the architects had planned to use as cover for maximum casualties had passed through the region with only minor disruptions. Power grids held, emergency services functioned normally, and people went about their lives blissfully unaware of how close they'd come to global catastrophe. The official story, crafted by intelligence agencies worldwide, attributed the cyber attacks to coordinated criminal organizations that had been successfully neutralized through international cooperation. The Chronos project remained classified, and Zoey's role in preventing global war would never appear in any history book. She didn't mind. Fame had never been what she wanted. Elena, who had returned to her cover identity as Dr. Vasquez, department head, slid into the booth across from her, carrying 2 steaming cups of coffee. The past 3 weeks had aged them both, but Elena seemed more relaxed than Zoey had ever seen her. "How are you feeling?" Elena asked, studying Zoey's face for signs of the neurological damage they'd all feared. "Different," Zoey admitted. "The quantum entanglement left residues. I can still sense information flows sometimes, especially when I'm near electronic devices. It's like having a sixth sense that I'm still learning to control. Any regrets?" Zoey considered the question carefully. The quantum cascade had indeed burned out the Chronos network permanently, making her the last person to ever experience the full Heritage Protocol. 44 antique timepieces around the world had become nothing more than family heirlooms again. No, she said finally. My grandfather designed the network as a weapon of last resort. Using it meant destroying it, but that was always the plan. Elena nodded. Volkov sends his regards, by the way. He's decided it's time for Dmitry Volkov to officially die again. He'll be returning to Russia under a new identity to help their intelligence services root out architect infiltrators. And the other carriers? The 39 who survived are being debriefed and relocated. Most of them want nothing more than to return to their normal lives and forget any of this happened. I can understand that. Elena pulled a manila folder from her bag and slid it across the table. Speaking of normal lives, I have something for you. Zoey opened the folder to find a job offer from MIT's Quantum Communications Research Institute. The position was tenure-track, well-funded, and focused on developing quantum encryption systems for civilian applications. It's real work, Elena assured her. No secret military connections, no hidden agendas. Just genuine research into quantum communication technologies that could revolutionize global connectivity while maintaining privacy and security. And if I prefer to stay at Nexus, then you stay. Your position there is secure, and we've removed all the monitoring equipment from your workstation. No more orchestrated career paths or manipulated opportunities. Zoey sipped her coffee, thinking about the offer. The academic world had always appealed to her, but leaving Austin would mean leaving behind the first place she'd ever felt like she truly belonged. There's something else, Elena continued. The quantum cascade did more than just destroy the architect's network. It also burned quantum markers into the global communication infrastructure, signatures that will make it impossible for anyone to build another surveillance network like theirs without us detecting it immediately. A permanent safeguard, your grandfather's final gift to the world. He designed the Heritage Protocol not just to stop the architects, but to prevent anyone else from following their path. Through the cafe window, Zoey watched people hurrying through the rain, each absorbed in their own lives and concerns. Students from the University of Texas, tech workers from the surrounding companies, families doing their holiday shopping. Normal people living normal lives in a world that was just a little bit safer because of decisions made by people they'd never meet. Elena, she said, when you recruited me for Nexus, did you know what would happen? I knew your grandfather had left you something important, and I suspected it might be significant to our work. But the full scope of the Chronos network, the Heritage Protocol, the global conspiracy? Elena shook her head. Your grandfather kept those secrets even from his closest allies. He trusted that when the time came, you'd make the right choices. No pressure, Zoey said with a wry smile. He was proud of you, you know. Before he died, he told me that raising you to be curious, independent, and skeptical of authority was the most important mission of his life. Zoey looked down at her grandfather's watch, its familiar weight comforting against her wrist. The quantum resonance was gone, but the watch still kept perfect time after all these years. Some things, she reflected, were valuable precisely because they endured without fanfare or recognition. I'll think about the MIT offer, she said, closing the folder. But first, I want to finish the project I was working on before all this started. The quantum encryption protocol for emergency services? If we can make it work, first responders will have unbreakable communication during disasters. It won't prevent the next global conspiracy, but it might save lives when more conventional emergencies happen. Elena smiled. Your grandfather would approve. He always said the best way to honor the past was to build a better future. As Elena left to return to her official duties, Zoey remained in the cafe, watching the rain and thinking about legacy. Her grandfather had spent decades preparing for a threat that might never come, creating safeguards for a world that would never know he'd protected it. Now she understood that some responsibilities transcended recognition or reward. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Richard, her colleague who had once mocked her outdated timepiece. Coffee later? I've been thinking about what you said about things that endure without needing to sync with anything. Zoey smiled, typing back, sure, but I'm buying. I've got some stories to tell you about the value of old technology. She looked out at the Austin skyline, where construction cranes reached towards storm clouds like mechanical prayers. The city was growing, changing, always building something new. But underneath the innovation and progress, there are foundations laid by earlier generations. People who'd worked in shadows and made sacrifices so that future builders could reach higher. Her grandfather's watch ticked steadily against her wrist, keeping time as it had for 72 years. No satellites, no network connections, no quantum entanglement, just precision engineering and the momentum of a wound spring. Some things, Zoey thought, were perfect exactly as they were. The rain began to ease, and shafts of late afternoon sunlight broke through the clouds, illuminating the drops on the cafe window like scattered diamonds. Somewhere in the distance, she could hear the sound of construction, the steady rhythm of a city building itself toward tomorrow. Zoey finished her coffee, gathered her things, and stepped out into the clearing afternoon. She had work to do, a future to build, and a legacy to honor. Her grandfather's watch would keep time through all of it, marking each moment as it passed from present into memory, from possibility into history. The world was safe for now. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and new chances to make choices that mattered. And when those moments came, she would be ready. After all, she had excellent timing. If you like this story, leave your opinion in the comments and, of course, leave a like and subscribe. Turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any videos. Big hug, and see you soon.